right, so tonight you're in for a treat. Josh Brahm is with the Equal Rights Institute and has worked with all of the quote-unquote dream team of
the Lady Gagas of apology.
That's right.
As Bailey calls
That's what I always call them.
Yeah. He's worked with them throughout his whole career, now has started his own apologetics, pro-life apologetics ministry based out of Charlotte. And we're hoping that Josh and Christi can really partner with them. We can do a lot of work with them. They're just really, they want to engage people with the pro-life view. A lot of the ministries are really good at debates. They're really wanting to focus on one-on-one conversations, which is what we want to focus on the campus. So I think there's going to be a really, hopefully, great partnership with them for years to come with Ratio. Let me just say this on the front end. Some of you are new. This is a hard topic to talk about. This is a hard topic for us. I mean, we're going to spend the whole week talking about abortion. And that's a really hard thing to talk about because statistically, every person in this room, whether you know it or not, has been affected by abortion. And so what we're not here to do tonight is to guilt people for past decisions. There is grace and there's mercy at the cross, literally, thank God.
Yep. Amen.
Because I know for me, when I was your age, I did not grow up in a Christian household. I did not make wise decisions with my life. And at 19, I found myself with my girlfriend who was pregnant. And she got an abortion. And I lived with the guilt for that for pretty much a decade. And it wasn't until I came to know Jesus and I came to know the forgiveness and the grace and the mercy that comes in Jesus that I was actually able to finally move on from that and forgive myself. And so we are not here to condemn. We are here to educate. But the reality is that this is happening. And so because it matters, and because firsthand for me, I understand the gravity of it, we will always talk about this issue every semester if I can help it, but certainly every year we'll do some kind of big event because this issue really does matter to people, and there are lots of people that are dealing with the reality of the consequences of a false worldview and what that brings on you. And so we are pointing people to Jesus, and we are pointing people towards the truth, but the truth of these really important questions is something that we want to wrestle with. We want to wrestle through well. We want you to walk away tonight being challenged in the truth, but also recognize that there's the love of Jesus that is available for us all. So be challenged, ask good questions, seek good answers. We want to be here. We'll hang out, we'll talk. But this is going to be the whole week. We're going to be talking about this. We want the whole campus talking about this issue. And engaging in good conversations, and prayerfully that will be for God's glory. So I will turn it over to Mr. Brahm and take it away.
Awesome, thanks. Good evening. I am so excited to be hanging out with you guys for the next couple of days. I have been just a hardcore fan of Ratio Christi for the last couple of years. There's so much in common between our organizations, and so really, really looking forward to working with you and in as many ways that we can serve you as possible. So just excited to be here doing one of my favorite things, which is talking about pro-life apologetics. I was in the Denver airport several years ago, and I had like a layover thing. I had 45 minutes. That's enough time to grab a sandwich and sit at my gate and eat and then fly home. And I sat across from a businesswoman in her late 30s, and she asked me the question that I've spent my entire career hating, which is, what do you do for a living? Because it's I want to have a good conversation, and if it starts off on the wrong foot, because who wants to talk to the abortion guy, then it's not going to be good. So it's I've always tried to figure out, how do I answer that question in a way that is more likely to begin a good, productive conversation? So I answered her question that day in a way that I've never said before, and now this has become kind of the only thing that I say when people ask me the question. She says, what do you do for a living? And I said, I try to help pro-life people to be less weird. And she kind of smiled a little bit. So it was already working better than anything I'd ever said before. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, well, I'm trying to help pro-life people to make more good arguments and fewer bad ones. But like more importantly, I want to help us to connect relationally with people who are different from us, with people who have a different religious background, a different political background. I just want to help us to connect. And by weird, and there's good kinds of weird. There's like the fact that like y'all are in this room tonight doing this. There's something kind of weird. That's a good weird. That's fine. Going to the March for Life in sub-zero temperatures. That's weird. What I mean I'd want us to be less of is like, have you ever seen those people that are well-meaning but off-putting? We don't want to be like that because our work is already cut out for us, so why make it harder? And so what I want to try to do is help pro-life people to be less weird and more like Jesus. Like I'm fascinated by the question, what would it look like if Jesus talked to a pro-choice person? What would his body language be like? What kinds of questions would he ask? What would he not ask? What would it sound like when he made arguments that are grounded in truth, but spoken with gentleness and grace? I want to help the pro-life movement to get closer to that mark. And by the way, I had an amazing conversation with a woman in the Denver airport. By the end of it, she was admitting that she was out of good pro-choice arguments, and she said, "I can't believe you're so nice." She told to the pro-life the pro-life man who had just told her about how rape abortion should be against the law. And all of that happened because of a combination of the arguments that I made, but maybe more importantly, how I treated her. So I want to help pro-life people to do that well. It is so much more about how you treat them than just the arguments, but both are really important. And so 5 years ago, my brother, who's a philosophy grad from Biola, and I got together thinking we were going to write a book on practical dialogue tips, which is one of my topics for tonight. But instead, we ended up dreaming up this nonprofit because Tim said this thing out loud. He said the pro-life movement is not known for its love. And it's like, oh, that's true. It's not good. And I said, we're not known for being a very thoughtful group of people either. So we got like two big problems if we're going to change culture. And so we launched the Equal Rights Institute 5 years ago to help pro-life people to become less weird and more like Jesus. And so kind of like at a scriptural level, the heart behind this ministry is Colossians 4, 5 through 6, which says, conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be filled with grace, as a seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. And I love that because it assumes that you should respond differently to different people, because people are complicated. One of the things that we wanted to do when we launched CRI is we wanted to create an innovative and flexible apologetics organization. We love R&D, like research and development. When we go into a campus to do outreach, that's our lab. We're trying new things. I've got a Google Doc full of ideas of things that I want to try or things that I've tried but I haven't tried enough times to find out, is it working consistently? We're always trying to beat our own material because truth does not change, but culture changes. Psychology changes. What is persuasive changes. Gen Z thinks psychologically different than Gen X did in a lot of ways. And so that means that maybe the arguments that we use that will be the most persuasive might change. And so I'm going to be talking to you about two of my favorite topics tonight. One is practical dialogue tips. I'm going to teach you 7 of the things that we've learned that just help a conversation to go better. And some of it will be things that you already do that have just come naturally to you, or things that you're already taught. That's awesome. Some of them are more unique to ERI, so I'm going to teach you a little bit about our style of dialogue, and hopefully you'll try it out and see if it's working better than what you do. And then I'm also going to talk to you about the argument that we found to change the most minds. Because we kind of stumbled upon this awesome J.P. Moreland argument several years ago, and we'd never seen anything change more minds from pro-choice to pro-life on the spot. So those are the 2 things I'm going to be telling you about tonight, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. Sound good? Are you ready for this? Yes. Okay. So practical dialogue tips. I like practical. I like nitty-gritty. Our staff has cumulatively had about 5,000 conversations, one-on-one, with pro-choice people. And we've learned a lot of things. We've learned a lot from mistakes, and we just get really analytical about it. We'll hang out and talk about our conversations or watch each other's conversations and just try to figure out, how do you get someone to feel receptive instead of defensive? Because a lot of times when these conversations start, you've all had this experience, people start and they're in fight mode. And if they're in fight mode, they're not likely to really hear your arguments. They're too distracted by trying to win. And so how do we get people to feel receptive instead of defensive? How do we get their walls down? Well, that's not so much in the arguments, but just in the little things that you can do to help a conversation to go better. So I'm going to give you 7 because these were the 7 that I picked for today. A few of them I'm going to start with a few basic ones. These are ones that you probably already do. So 1, ask clarification questions. A lot. Why? Because you don't know what the other person thinks, intends, or feels, as my friend Steve Wagner says. And the problem is, especially when you do this a lot, like the more that you do dialogue, the more of a risk factor this becomes, where you get to where you start assuming that you know what this person thinks. Like if they might say a phrase or an argument you've heard before, and then kind of project what the last person meant onto this person. And worse, we might even tell them what they think or intend or feel. It's just super obnoxious. Don't do that. And so instead, you want to ask lots of clarification questions. You know, you said you're pro-choice. Help me understand what that means for you. Like, oh, this thing is like buzzing. What is going on? All right, so this is not working. What is happening? All right, so I need a clicker. I need a physical clicker person. All right, that's gonna be your. Okay, thanks. Man, that is so weird. This is what happens when we don't charge our clickers ahead of time. They just go on their own. Clicker's like, I'm pro-choice. I'm going to choose to go as fast as I want to go. Like, no. Mine. Okay, so where was I? Ask a lot of clarification questions because you don't know what this other person. So if someone says, I'm pro-choice, like, I have no idea what that means to them. Like I've heard so many different views described under the label pro-choice. So it's like I've learned next to nothing. Like, flesh that out for me. Help me understand what you meant when you said pro-choice, you know? And I might even just like start leading with a few questions just to help them get going, help them start clarifying their views. I don't care what the last person meant when she said she was pro-choice. I care about what you mean. When you say you're pro-choice, I want to get to know you. I want to understand where you're coming from. You said, my body, my choice. That can mean at least 4 different arguments. So I'm not sure what you mean by that. Could you help flesh it out for me? Would it be helpful if I gave you some examples of what those things might even be, just to kind of help get us started? Like I'll do whatever I can to try to bring clarity to the conversation. So ask lots of clarification questions. Next, this is going to work well. We're going to be a team. Okay, silence your inner monologue. This is the voice that's going on your head while I'm speaking. You're thinking about all these different things I'm saying. This is the voice, and this happens a lot when we're talking to people, is we're in our head thinking about our next argument, right? Like, my inner monologue sounds like this sometimes. So I'm talking to a pro-choice person, and I'll be like, wow, so he's making a whole lot of arguments in a row. Which one should I choose to respond to? Should I respond to the first thing that she said, or the last thing that she ends up saying, or the thing that like is the easiest to respond to? I'm hungry. What's that thing that my wife said she wanted me to do tonight? Like, okay, so that's not listening, right? And I had to learn this by having a couple of really important conversations with my wife several years ago. So guys, listen up. This one's for free. I had built up this dumb husband habit of coming home from work. I've got 3 sons, 10, 8, and 6. Yeah. I'm so glad to be here. So they all want to play with me. I know that was really mean. I'm just kidding. I love them and everything. But like they want to. This is a safe crowd. I'm feeling good here. Except for this one girl who's like, oh, actually, they're so mad at me. They all want to play, you know, lightsabers or pillow fights or whatever. But they know there's a rule in my house: mommy matters more than you. So I'm going to go and hang out with mom and help her de-stress, and then I'll play with the kids. And so I built up this dumb husband habit where I would be talking to my wife, and she would be telling me about her day, like she might be like making dinner or whatever, and I would be on my phone browsing Facebook statuses. Oh man, listen to the judgment. Do you feel the judgment in this room right now? Judge not lest you be judged, okay? Here's the thing. It was so innocent. I thought I was listening because I could tell that she was, you know, talking. And I was kind of following the themes. But as soon as he asked me like a comprehension question, I failed miserably. Because it turns out that you can't multitask. Like everyone thinks they can multitask. Like so many psychologists have now proven you don't actually multitask. It's your brain moving quickly from one thing to another. You can't do it as effectively as you probably think you can. So I was just overestimating my ability to multitask. So it's so obvious to everyone in this room that I shouldn't be on Facebook while my wife's talking to me, right? Like that's not a very good way to love my wife. And yet, probably most of us, if not all of us, will be having a philosophical conversation with someone while having an inner monologue going on in our head. It doesn't work. So what I'm trying to do when I'm in a dialogue, when I'm going to be trying to do this tomorrow, which is going to be really hard because it's going to be like cameras and stuff. But what I'm trying to do is turn that monologue off and just be present in the moment with this person. And try to respond as appropriately as I can, even just with my body language if she shares something really personal. Like, there's a lot of really sensitive topics that come up in the abortion debate. And yeah, that means that maybe when she's done talking, I might have to take a beat and process. Because I haven't been planning my next move, right? So I might have to do that work after she's done. And pro-lifers watching might be like, ooh, man, that's an awkward pause. No, it's an awesome pause. I just went through puberty. No, it's an awesome pause. Why? Because it shows her what? It shows her that I'm taking her view seriously. It shows her that people aren't used to that. People aren't used, not these days, aren't used to having their views actually taken seriously. What if pro-life Christians changed that paradigm? What if everyone that you talk to walks away at least feeling like they were heard? Like that person really gets where I was coming from. Yet they're still pro-life. I have to wrestle with that. What if we could do that? Okay, next. Find genuine common ground when possible. This is so helpful to a dialogue. People think that we're polar opposites. I've talked to pro-lifers that thought that. It's like, look, you either think baby murder is right or baby murder is wrong. There's black or white. There's no middle ground, and that's just not the way the world works. I've spoken to over 1,000 pro-choice people myself. Most of them thought that abortion was bad. That some abortions are wrong, and some of them should even be illegal, like late-term abortions, or sex selection abortions, where we abort girls because they're girls. And they think that abortion should happen less often. I can agree with all those things. It's your job to point that out. Every time common ground happens, try to point that out, either verbally or at least with body language, or those little verbal those little sounds, like the things that show them you are not polar opposites. And it's going to help them feel like, ooh, maybe we can actually have a reasonable conversation. Which is not what they usually expect when they start a conversation with a pro-lifer, because there's a stereotype of pro-lifers. We're all a bunch of angry, old white men who want things to go back to the good old days when women didn't vote, and women were in the kitchen, barefoot, breastfeeding twins. That's kind of the view. That's not how pro-lifers are. But the dude with the bullhorn, that's the stereotype. So you get to play good cop, bad cop with a caricature of the pro-life movement that's in their head. You're going to be so intriguing to them just by being different from what they're expecting. Just by being loving and nice and not weird and thoughtful. Just doing that, it's like you've got this crazy advantage of what they're not expecting. So whenever they say things that you can agree with, I think late-term abortions are wrong. Oh yeah, I agree with you there. It's one of some of the powerful words on the campus. Oh, I like what you said. And don't only talk about that, then talk about the things that you disagree on. And then when you can, find common ground throughout that, and you're just going to have a better conversation. Next, tip number 4, affirm their feelings. So a lot of times when you're talking to a pro-choice person, they might vent about a bad situation they had with another pro-life person. And a lot of pro-lifers feel this sense of loyalty, they shouldn't admit that someone else who's pro-life might have done something wrong. And I think loyalty is a good thing, but it can be misplaced. If I've got a pro-choice person telling me that there was a pro-lifer that yelled in their face because they were going to not vote for Trump or something, I'm really sorry. People shouldn't treat each other like that. I certainly wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't want anyone to be yelling at each other about who they vote for. How are we going to be able to have a good conversation if we're doing that? Feel free to just admit that you disagree sometimes with other pro-life people. And affirm their feelings in that. Yeah, I would have been really frustrated by that. If that happened to me, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Affirm their feelings when you can. Next, rephrase what they said. So a lot of these tips come down to clarity is our friend, is a thing that my brother has said. We want as much clarity as possible. The hard thing about the abortion debate is pro-choice people are often unclear. Pro-life people can be too, by the way, but pro-choice people, often their rhetoric can be very unclear. And so what we want to do is make clarity completely our responsibility. If people who've taken our online course, they have a huge advantage. It's not a fair fight. Because at that point, they're more prepared for this dialogue than 95% of pro-life people. It's like an advanced course on pro-life dialogue tips and philosophy. And so instead of having this attitude of clarity as like a 50-50 responsibility, I want to make it as much my burden as possible, which means I'm going to be doing things to make sure that I'm being as clear as possible, that they understand what I'm saying, but I also want to make sure that I'm understanding accurately what they're saying. Even if they're being unclear, I can help avoid straw men by rephrasing what they said. So I might say sometimes okay, let me stop before I respond. Let me just make sure I'm accurately understanding what you're saying. Let me feed back what I hear you saying, and you correct me if I get any of this wrong. I hear you saying, and then you describe what you hear them saying. And they might say, no, you got part of that wrong, and then you might have to go through a few rounds of this, of corrections, and that's awesome. That's fine. It's well worth my time to take a few minutes to make sure I'm accurately understanding their view, instead of accidentally strawmanning them by responding to this caricature of what pro-choice people are like that are in my head. I want to accurately understand what this person's coming from. And if it sounds like they're making a dumb argument, ask them a lot of questions. They're probably not making a dumb argument. They just aren't clarifying or communicating their argument that well. Most people aren't dumb. Okay? There are a few really, really dumb pro-choice arguments, but a lot of the ones that sound dumb, there's a better argument. They're just not wording it very well. And so take your time, understand the strongest version of their argument before you respond to it. Next, tell them that they can't offend you. This is one of these things that is so helpful that it's worth doing in every conversation. Because, Gen Z, we don't want to offend people. We're terrified of offending each other, and sometimes overly. And so sometimes all of pro-choice people, they're being really kind of thoughtful. I've had pro-choice people drop an F-bomb, and then they're oh, I'm so sorry. They're worried that I've really offended my feelings because they assume I'm a Christian, which I am, but they're assuming that too, even if I haven't said that. And I'll just be oh, you can't offend me, it's okay. Or if they say something kind of snarky or whatever, no, you can't. You can probably offend me if you really try. If you call me a bunch of names, at some point, you can offend me. But generally speaking, I'm trying to make this kind of a safe place. I'm not talking in safe spaces like trigger warnings and all that stuff. What I mean is I want this conversation to feel safe. I want them to feel safe. People don't change their minds when they don't feel emotionally safe. This is really important for you to understand. Generally, there's caveat, torture, brainwashing. There's really unhealthy ways to change someone's mind and they don't feel safe. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just generally speaking, think about the times that you've changed your mind. It's not when someone was in your face debating you about how you're an idiot if you don't agree with them. That just causes the defenses to go up and become no, I'm definitely right. You're even less likely to change your view if someone does that. And so I will often just find this opportunity if they seem like they're stepping on eggshells around me. It's fine. You can't offend me. We're fine. Let's just have a conversation. It just helps the conversation go well. One more. All right, this is the most controversial probably one. This goes against some of our, we have some colleagues in apologetics that would, there's some respectful disagreement here, but this kind of goes to our style. For those of you that can't see the screens at the bottom, it says avoid arguments with question marks. So we ask lots of clarification questions, but we avoid making arguments with question marks. These are the kinds of questions that might sound well, it seems like if this is true, then wouldn't this other thing have to be true? That kind of thing. There's an argument there, but it's in question form. And this is really effective if you're in a debate. If you're Mike Adams, you'll probably see Mike use a lot of arguments with question marks. Fine. It's really rhetorically effective in a debate, which is exactly why you should generally avoid them in a one-on-one dialogue. Because it's so rhetorically effective. What'll end up happening is the person will often feel like you're leading them somewhere. And I'm not even saying that all of these are necessarily inherently leading questions. That's not the point. The point is it makes them feel led. It makes them feel like you're taking them somewhere. And they might not know where, but they can tell you're trying to take them somewhere, and they don't trust you. They don't want to go where you're going because they think they're going to lose debate points, so they just freeze. Like, think of like, this isn't a perfect analogy, but kind of it's like I have this image in my head of like if there is like this minefield, like with all these mines in it, but like you know the way. And you're like, come on, let's cross the minefield together. And they're like, no, like I don't know what you're doing, but I don't trust you, so I don't want to go there with you. Like it makes them feel defensive often in that one-on-one dialogue. And you don't want that, like you don't want walls to be going up for them because they already have walls up before you start talking to them. Pro-choice people I talk to, they've already got a wall up. They've told themselves often whatever they had to say for years because they want to be pro-choice. People have the amazing ability to believe what they want to believe. So they've said things like, it's not a person, it's not a person, it's not a person, bodily rights, bodily rights, bodily rights, pro-lifers are mean, pro-lifers are mean, whatever. And they're entrenched in this pro-choice view, so they already have a wall up. And so if you do this thing where you are making them kind of feel defensive and have this extra wall go up, it's kind of like this scene from Return of the Jedi. Anyone remember this? All right, for those of you that don't remember, they're on Endor. They're trying to get into this Imperial base. It's really important. They got to shut down the Death Star shield. Okay, so R2-D2 is trying to hack into this panel that's going to open up this big blast door, that they've got to get through. And this crazy thing happens. The first stormtrooper to ever hit anything in his life hits R2-D2. It's crazy. It's like the most unbelievable moment in the entire movie. And so he's out. He's done. And so Han Solo kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, I guess I'll hotwire it. Because apparently the Imperial Empire is using the same technology as old cars. So he opens up this panel and starts messing with these wires. And there's this gag moment where he clearly crosses the wrong wires, and instead of this door opening up, another one comes down. Like now there's two doors in between them. That's what we do when we go to people who already have walls up and we ask them questions that feel leading to them and then makes another wall go down. We don't want to do that. So here's what we want to do instead. You can take that down. Is to just, it's kind of like playing the worst poker strategy ever. Put all your cards face up on the table. Our dialogue strategy is there's nothing up our sleeves. So for example, if someone says, I think we need abortion because of poverty. There are all these people that are really, really poor. They can't afford to have children. We need abortion for them. I'm going to find common ground and say, I agree with you. There's a lot of people who are totally in that situation. They have no idea how they would be able to financially handle a baby. And so this is like one of the most stressful things to ever happen for them to end up in this unplanned pregnancy. Let me ask you kind of a weird question. Like there's this, like I've got this view that you're probably going to think is kind of strange. Because I agree with you that poverty is terrible. I don't want that to be going on. But I'm not instantly pro-choice now, and here's why. I've got this view that an unborn embryo is morally equal with a toddler. I know, that sounds crazy to you. Okay, but that's my view right now. If you change my mind about that, I'm with you. I'm pro-choice. But right now, as a pro-lifer, I think that they're both morally equal. And so the reason I don't become pro-choice as soon as you say poverty, even though we both agree that poverty is terrible, is because I don't think we should be able to kill toddlers to solve like a budget problem. And so because I think that toddlers and the unborn are the same morally, then I don't think we should be able to kill the unborn because of poverty. Like there's got to be something better that we can do. Okay, so I just took some more time to explain my view. That wasn't a soundbite. We don't do a lot of sound bites. It's just not so much our style. We're trying to be as clear and transparent and genuine as possible, just put our cards face up. I'm basically giving them a roadmap to how to beat my argument. I'm giving them like Google Maps instructions, like you want to know exactly how to ruin me at an argument level, here's how to get there. Because they're probably going to say something like, oh, well, I just don't think that the unborn and the toddler are the same. Okay, cool, let's talk about that. But what I've done there is I've laid out my argument. I've made it really clear, here's where we agree, but here's why I'm not pro-choice yet. Because I've got this view that's like really important to my view, which is different, of course, than yours, but here's where I'm coming from. I'm laying my cards on the table. And we have found this to just work so much better with young people. Young people, it's been scientifically proven at a psychological level, young people are the most skeptical generation ever. We are more skeptical of advertisements, for example. We really don't want to be deceived or lied to. So advertising doesn't work as well on our generation. And so just by being as transparent as possible and help them to trust me. I'm not trying to pull any tricks. There's no rhetorical tricks here. I don't want to win this. There's even no winning. There's not a debate. There's no points. It's just us. So I just want to, here's my view. Help me understand why I'm wrong, is the attitude. And I'll give you an example of being able to see how much more effective this was than the other way. We were at Portland Community College several years ago doing a 2-day outreach. And the first day we were there was on April 20th, 420. I don't have a pot day I end up on a college campus, but it just has become this thing that sometimes just happens multiple times, randomly, where it's we get on a campus, we're oh, it's April 20th. And so campus smelled interesting that day, and we talked to a lot of people who thought they were really philosophical. It's you're a utilitarian who's high. It's a different thing, but Anyway, we didn't take a lot of pictures that day. It was a really ugly spot on campus. We weren't outside, we were inside. It was kind of ugly area of campus, but it was the best spot on campus because we were right in front of the cafeteria. So all these different directions, if you got the munchies, you had to come through us. It was great. So I ended up, we had this poll table set up, which is usually what we do. We just set up a table that says, should abortion remain legal, or some question like that. And then we'll have a yes option and a no option and an it depends option in the middle. Come and talk to us. We're just inviting people to come and talk to us. And I am talking to this fairly short girl that I'm going to call Ariel for the sake of the story. And I'm literally... What? What was so funny about this? Okay, so there's a point. There's a reason why I said she was short. I'm not just dissing her. There's a point. So I'm sitting on her table, and there's not a table up here, but if you find me at an outreach, unless there's a change your mind table, which I've never done before, but except for tomorrow, I'm usually just sitting on our table. And I do that for a few reasons. One, it shows I'm relaxed, and that helps them usually feel more relaxed. It's a little body language thing. But also, as kind of a tall guy, I'm not basketball player tall, but I'm taller than the average guy. There's this obnoxious thing that tall guys sometimes do. I don't think they realize they're doing it, but they'll do this thing where they kind of lord their height over short women. And it's kind of obnoxious and kind of cringy. And so I don't want to do that. And so I'm trying to get as close to eye line with short women as I can. And I'm not going to get on my knees. That's weird. So sitting on the table is the best option. And so I'm sitting on the table. I'm talking to Ariel. And we're having a pretty good conversation. We actually got a picture of this conversation. You can actually see. See? She's not that tall. Okay? It's for real. So she's maybe 5'0". So I'm sitting on her table, and then Gabriel showed up. Not the angel. Something else. This is not hyperbole when I say that Gabriel is the most obnoxious pro-life person I have ever spent time with on a campus. I've been doing this my whole life. So that's a serious statement. I've hung out with some obnoxious pro-lifers. But Gabriel was at a different level. I'm going to describe him for you. I can picture him. So we didn't take any pictures of him that day. I was hoping to forget him. I can't. He's burned into my memory. I can see him so clearly right now. Gabriel is super tall. He's 6'5". He's really skinny. He's got this military style, really short haircut thing. He's wearing a full-length black leather trench coat, like Neo from The Matrix, which is not in, by the way. If you're wondering, it's not in. And he's got one look on his face. He spent hours there to spite me. I tried to get him to go away. I couldn't. He didn't like me either. One look on his face the entire time he was there. It was a look that said, I am the smartest individual within 100 yards of this place, so I'm going to hang out and play with you, mouse, for my own amusement. That was his look. So Gabriel shows up to the outreach while I'm talking to Ariel. And he walks right up. He sees there's a pro-life thing going on. He said he was part of the Students for Life Club. He's not. He's not part of the club. He walks up right opposite from Ariel, and he gives her this condescending look, Well, it was the only look. It was the look that he had. He gave her the look. And he says, do you believe this? And I don't remember how the sentence ended, but it was like some stupid pro-choice view. And then before she could answer, he was also like, and do you also believe this? Some other stupid pro-choice view. And I looked at Ariel and I could just see her shut down. And I said, pause. Let's have a meta discussion. Let's have a discussion about the discussion. Okay, Ariel, I've got a question for you. So Ariel, we're two pro-life men. Which one of us is more likely to change your mind? And Ariel instantly says, you. And I said, why? I'm really interested in persuasion. I want to know, why am I more likely to change your mind? And she said two things. She said, well, I like your body language. I'm sitting down, I'm relaxed. This is so funny. The reason I'm laughing at it is because I hired this guy who didn't really think body language mattered that much. And now I've got all these stories of people telling me that my body language helped them. So I'm just like, this is like a win for me. He's persuaded now. So he's like, I like your body language. I'm relaxed. I'm close to her eye line. This guy is like directly across from her in fight mode, you know. And then she said, and I like the kinds of questions you ask. You see, she was super pro-choice, and I had asked her a lot of clarification questions. And then sometimes I just made my argument. And this guy was only asking these obnoxious leading questions. Now, this is kind of an extreme example. Not all arguments with question marks are that obnoxious. But I think it tends to make people feel defensive. And so ask clarification questions, and when it's time to make your argument, just make your argument. Just say what's going on in your head. Here's what's going on for me. Just explain it. Try to do it, as briefly as you can. Don't like do a 10-minute monologue, but just like, here's what's going on for me, and take a minute, and that's fine. And then okay, come back at me. Help me figure out help me break my argument, like that kind of thing. And this style just helps. It puts people at ease. It makes people feel like this is a real, genuine conversation. It helps them to stick around. Okay, now I want to talk to you about what we have found to be the most persuasive argument. You can go ahead and switch it up. So this is not our argument. We learned it from Dr. J.P. Moreland, this brilliant philosopher at Biola. Steve Wagner, a friend of mine, heard him say this thing, and then he and my brother Tim started modifying it for use on campus, and then we just started trying it all over the country, and we've never seen any single argument change as many minds from pro-choice to pro-life on the spot as this argument. And number two, by the way, there's actually kind of a number two and number three. They're kind of tied. They're not even close. This is so persuasive. This is one of the reasons we wanted to start Equal Rights Institute, was we wanted to teach people what we call the equal rights argument. It's so persuasive because of a few things. One, we're taking a break from talking about abortion, like a mini break, which it can actually be helpful to discussion, and get them talking about something that is probably one of the most important things to them, equality. Our generation cares more about equality than probably any other single thing. So we're going to talk about equality, and we're going to make an argument that in the end, basically, they're going to have to choose between being pro-equality and pro-choice. I'm going to try to make them choose between those two things. And most pro-choice people would rather be pro-equality. And so then they will be willing to change. I think also the way that we're responding to their common counter-arguments is just really rhetorically effective. And we've tried a lot of different things. We're always trying different things. And we just never found anything that works better than this. So I want to tell you about it. So we call it the equal rights argument, and there's kind of three questions going on as in the structure of the argument. So the first question is, do we have an equal right to life? And by we, I don't mean the unborn. I'm not hiding fetal personhood in premise one of this argument. That would be a circular argument. By we, I mean human adults. We're going to look at the most obvious case of persons, which is human adults. Secondly, do you think that means there's something the same about us? And then that kind of naturally leads to the last question, which is, what is that thing? What is the same about us? Now, this isn't what it sounds like when I make the argument. I'm not like, question one. It's not like that. I've got kind of this kind of way of explaining the argument. So let me describe that for you so you understand how it sounds in real time usually when I make it. So we're at UC Davis a couple of years ago, the most volatile outreach that we've ever done. UC schools are not great on free speech. And so it got kind of crazy. There was this thing that happened, the pro-choice people were actually already protesting before we got there, so they've been tipped off, I assume by someone in the administration on the campus. They were assuming that we were bringing bringing big graphic signs, which is not what we do. We have them in a brochure. We use them with consent. So there were all these, we got onto campus to set up early in the morning. There's this place at the quad, but near a flagpole that we were going to set up our table. And there was this group of women with these umbrellas. And it was like, nice warm spring day in California. It was like, this is weird. Okay, whatever. We just kind of ignored it and kind of went over here and we set up our stuff and they're like way down this way. And then someone went the other direction down the sidewalk and they saw another group of umbrella people. It's like, weird. We found out they thought that we all had these big graphic signs and they were warning everyone that passed by, do you want an umbrella escort so we can protect you from the scary images? And everyone turned them down. We never saw one person actually do this thing. And then they passed by our pool table. But just add words on signs. It didn't even have fetal development images on them. So at some point we kind of figured it out. And I asked my brother Tim, I'm like, should we tell them? He was like, yeah. So they kept doing their thing. Eventually they figured it out. And then there was they started this whole protest in front of us. They had brought hula hoops for some reason. I still don't know why. It was really weird. They're singing and dancing and whatever. So eventually there was things got a little bit crazy and there was vandalism of our stuff and this one guy seemed like he was going to hit me. Before all that happened though, I'm talking to this, and we might have a picture of this. Let me see that. Yes, I'm talking to these girls. I'm sitting on a table in kind of what my staff is affectionately calling guru pose. This is not affectionate, they're making fun of me. And I don't do it as much anymore, but it's just this is literally me relaxed. I'm just trying to be as authentically relaxed as I can. So I'm sitting on our table talking to these girls, and they vented at me. They were really angry. They vented at me for a while, and then to her credit, the girl in the red asked me, she said, why are you here? What's your argument? I said, I think I can explain to you why I'm pro-life in about 2 minutes. She said, go. What we could do with that 2 minutes? Here's what I did. I said, I'm a very open-minded person. Which means I'm a very uncomfortable person. I hold most of my views with a pretty open hand. There's 2 things that I'm positive about. 2 + 2 is 4 in a base 10 system, and my own existence. Everything else falls on a spectrum of confidence for me. And yet, one of the views that I have that would be at least really hard for you to change my mind on is this. So everyone that I can see right now has an equal right to life. So we're outside the quad at UC Davis. We're really near the area where there's all these outside tables where people have lunch outside the cafeteria. So you can see 100 at least people at that time. So I said, look around. There's people all over here. I think they all have an equal right to life. But that's kind of a weird view, isn't it? Because there's a lot of differences. I see some people who are really tall. I see some people who are really short. I see some people who are really smart. And I see some people who are trying their best. I've seen 5 people roll by in wheelchairs today. There's all these differences. There's some people who are really good at sports or music and some people who are not. So how can we possibly explain this thing that basically everyone in Western civilization agree? We all agree we get an equal right to life. But how can we explain that when there are so many differences? Now, a lot of times I would stop here and just let them kind of respond, but I only had 2 minutes, so I just kept going. I said, I think there's got to be something the same about us. There's something that we have in common. And this is key. Don't miss this. It's got to be something that we all have equally. It cannot be something that comes in degrees. It cannot be like a dimmer switch. It's got to be like a light switch. It's got to be an all or nothing kind of thing. Because remember, we're trying to figure out equality. How do we ground equality? So as a pause, I didn't do this with the girl. I only had the 2 minutes. But just to take this a little bit deeper. If someone said, whoa, humans are all equal because we're all intelligent. That's not going to do the job, is it? Why? Because some people are more intelligent than others. If you don't believe that, go to YouTube tonight, read the comments under the first video. You just randomly click on a video and read the comments. And you're going to see some people think better than others. And that's okay. They're equal. They're human. They're equal. So it's fine. It's just that's not the thing, right? It's got to be something that you either have or you don't have. That's going to be the key thing. So what could that thing be? I said, I think it's something like humanness. I said, it's something like humanness. Now I'm being a little bit philosophically vague in my language. I'm doing that on purpose. And the reason for that is we actually tested going super philosophically specific and precise at this outreach. We did it a bunch of times. And it messes up the conversation usually. Unless I'm talking to a philosophy student or a philosophy professor, Then I go straight, I don't say something like humanist. I just go straight to a more precise definition. We can get into that in Q&A if you really want to, but it's not necessary for 99% of pro-choice people. They kind of get what I'm getting at. So I say something like humanist. And if that's the thing that we all have in common, if that's the reason why we get an equal right to life, and if the unborn have that, which they totally do, then they get an equal right to life too, regardless of what our like intuitions are about them. And the last thing I said, I always say this, I said, notice something about my argument. This is not a religious argument. It's also not an emotional argument. I'm not pro-life for emotional reasons. I don't want to offend you, but I don't get the warm fuzzies when I look at a picture of an embryo. It looks like a fuzzy orange to me. Like it's not like when you know that thing when like your friends on Facebook post like a newborn baby and you're like, oh, the baby, like that thing. I don't get that when I see a zygote. I'm not pro-life for emotional reasons. I'm pro-life because it is the most rational conclusion that I can come to. Because I'm starting with equality as premise one, and I'm reasoning from there. What I'm not doing is reasoning backwards. This is what a lot of people do. Is they know the conclusion they want to end up on, and so they figure, okay, what premises do I need to construct so I end up where I want to end up? And that's bad. That's ad hoc reasoning. You end up making all kinds of mistakes that way. I'm not doing that. I'm just starting with equality as one of the most obvious, like it's one of the most obvious things I can start with, and reasoning from there and following the truth where it leads. Which is that the unborn has an equal right to life. I don't think they're like in the long, sad history of the human race, we've discriminated against all kinds of groups of humans. I don't think we're doing that for the first time and we're right. Like I think we're going to one day look back at this and as another tragic situation where we didn't understand the value of this particular group of humans that were being discriminated against. And I've not yet heard a good reason for discriminating against the unborn. And so if you're going to be pro-equality, I said, then you need to be pro-life. I've never seen any argument change more minds on abortion. And so that's kind of what's going on. Now, they're probably going to come back and say, well, I don't think it's something like humanness. I think it's something else that makes you equal. So we're going to take this a little bit further. Just throw it out. What are some things that you've heard pro-choice people say that you need to have to be a person? Sorry? Consciousness. Good. Anyone else? Heartbeat. Awareness. Come on, there's more. Rationality is good. Pain sensors, yes. First breath. I've heard that sometimes. It's a little bit more extreme, but yes, I've heard that. A want to live. Self-awareness, yep. Okay, so when someone makes one of these arguments to me, when someone says, here's what you need to be in, then there's a rubric going on in my head. I'm testing their worldview against my worldview. I'm not just assuming right off the bat that they're wrong just because they disagree with me. That's closed-minded and arrogant. No, we're going to test our worldviews. How do we test them? Well, I've got 3 test questions going on in my head. The first one is, does their explanation of equality entail equal rights for adults? This is the easiest test to pass. Almost any pro-choice conclusion is going to get this one right. If it doesn't get this right, it's just like really, really off. Secondly, does their explanation entail equal rights for infants? Because one of the most obvious things that I think that I know is that newborns get an equal right to life. As a father who's been present for the birth of my 3 sons, it's really, really obvious. I think it's basically a properly basic belief that newborns are in. I can argue for it. I'm not convinced at an epistemological level that I should have to. I think they're just in. Third, does their explanation entail equal rights for animals? That was good. I didn't even point at you. You were just on it. That's awesome. We're sinking now. Does their explanation entail equal rights for animals? Because I think it shouldn't. I've got views that I can find common ground with most animal rights activists, which is really useful on a college campus. I think factory farming is, there's a lot of huge moral problems with it. I don't think that dolphins and killer whales should be in SeaWorld. I've got common ground I can find with animal rights people. What I do not believe is that animals and humans are equal. And we can often agree on that. It takes a pretty extreme animal rights activist to disagree with that. It happens. I was on a train one time from Bakersfield to Fresno. I'm sitting across, it's this kind of table thing. I had my laptop out. And this guy sits across from me with plops down this huge textbook. I'm like, ooh, what is that? And he's like, it's on robotics. He wants to be on the team that builds the first artistic robot. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. Have you seen iRobot? What about the 3 laws of robotics? So we started talking about things like that. And then he asked me about what I do. And ours is coming from a pro-life outreach at Pasadena City College. And so one of the things is I kind of gave a 3 or 4 minute summary of what I do and what I had been doing. I said, it's this interesting thing I'm noticing where I talk to all kinds of people. Christians, non-Christians, people of all kinds of faiths and no faith. And almost everyone I talk to agrees that there's something special about humans. And he said, oh no, my girlfriend would disagree with you about that. I said, really? Are you sure? I don't think so. He's like, no, I'll prove it to you. If she ever accidentally kills a fly. And this is how my dumb brain works. I'm like, how do you accidentally kill a fly? Have you ever tried to kill a fly? It's really hard, but I think that's not what he meant. I think he meant if she kills a bug. So I'm just going to insert that for him. If she ever accidentally kills a bug, he said, she has a moment of silence. So I don't think that she thinks that humans and animals are the same. And I'll prove it to you. If she ever accidentally runs over a kid, she's not just going to have a moment of silence. Right? It's at least going to wreck her day. It's probably going to be the worst thing that ever happens to her, but she's not just going to get out of the car and be like, namaste, and move on. It's going to be an event. And I know this is a total California stereotype. I swear. He said, dude. I think you're right. I'm going to go talk to her about that tonight. I'm sure they had an amazing evening together. The point is, we can usually find this common ground. And we'll push hard. When the extreme animal rights person is like, no, humans and animals are exactly the same. Here's the hardest we'll push. We try to be really pleasant in our dialogues. But if we have to push hard, we will push hard. I'm going to give you an example of that. This is the meanest we'll get with an animal rights person. We'll also have the person they're totally equal. They're because my thing is look, it's wrong to kill elephants, right? Because of how, what elephants can do. We should not, it'd be really wrong to herd 50 elephants into a field and kill them. My view is that would be even more wrong, though, to herd 50 humans into a field and kill them, right? They're not the same. And if I'm dealing with someone who's really stubborn, no, they're exactly the same. Okay, let me talk to you about one of my friends, a guy named Jacob, who's a hunter. My brother described how Jacob one day went out hunting deer. So he stalked this deer, and he shot it, and he brought it home. He skinned it and made sausage, and they ate it for breakfast. Okay. Now, of course, the animal rights person is like, oh my God, that kind of thing. I'm I know, right? And what do you think should happen? He should be in jail, right? How long should he be in jail for? 6 months. What? 6 months? What do you mean 6 months? You said they're the same. What if he did that to a girl? I don't think you're following me. Let me spell it out for you. What if Jacob stalked a girl, shot her, brought her home, skinned her, and made sausage and ate her for breakfast? He should be in a Hannibal Lecter mask talking to Jodie Foster from a glass prison for the rest of his life. What are you talking about? 6 months. It's easy to stand on this pretty college, ivory tower and be like, oh yeah, everything's equal, man. It's harder to live that way. Okay? It's our attempt to can we find some common ground? Is there something a little bit different? Okay, so usually the way that we walk through this rubric with people is we'll use the thought experiment that my brother Tim came up with called the zoo shooting. So let's say they say that you need to be sentient to be in. Imagine an equal right to life circle. Everything inside the circle gets an equal right to life. Everything outside of it doesn't, all right? We're trying to figure out what goes in the circle. So let's say they say you need to be sentient. Usually when they say sentient, they mean minimal awareness of the world around them. Minimal experiences. Okay, cool. Let's imagine we're hanging out at a zoo in front of the elephant exhibit, and a gunman shows up and starts shooting. And he gets 6 bullets fired before he's tackled by security. So let's think about the 6 bullets. The first bullet kills the world's unluckiest cockroach. Go ahead and hit the button. So there's some of you thought it was funny. Some of you are actually sad for the cockroach. This is the most empathetic response I've ever had. I've given this speech hundreds of times. I've literally never had someone say, aw. So there's something special going on with someone here. It's not what's going on for me. The second bullet kills a squirrel. The third bullet kills an elephant. Just kind of go with me. It's a thought experiment. It's to say it's like a really big bullet. Fourth bullet kills a newborn. The fifth bullet kills a toddler. This is one of my sons. I know, right? Do you know how much money we're losing not having to be a stock photo model? Like, and the sixth bullet kills an adult stock photo model. Okay. Now, how many murders? How many things belong in the equal right to life circle? I'm not asking what the law is. Who cares? What should the law be? How many of these things belong in the equal right to life circle? Now remember, the pro-choice person has said sentience is what gets you in. So let's say they're right. What if sentience is what makes you equal? Then how many of these 6 things go in the equal right to life circle? Sentience meaning, again, minimal awareness of the world around you. All of them. Like even cockroaches can do that. That's why they don't bump into walls. Right? So I don't think that's the world that I live in. I don't think I live in a world where squirrels being killed is equally wrong as toddlers getting killed. And this is how we're going to push against their view. There's all kinds of ways to push against the view that sentience is a necessary condition for personhood. You can talk about temporary coma cases and all kinds of things. I'm telling you, this is the most persuasive method. They have a squirrel problem. We'll just tell them, you got a squirrel problem. Squirrels are in the circle now, you know? Sometimes like if there's like a square on the campus, like the sidewalk, say, okay, this is the equal right to life square. Square. We're trying to figure out what goes in the square. Seems like now squirrels are in. That seems like a problem, you know? Now, they might change targets. They might see the problem, be like, ooh, yeah, we don't want squirrels in the equal right to life square. So they might move to something more advanced. Like they're trying to like find the sweet spot, how they can end up with their conclusion, which is pro-choice. Again, try to figure that out. So they might say something like more like self-awareness. And I'm always going to ask, what do you mean by self-awareness? Like define that for me. And usually they mean something like being able to cognitively tell that you're a unique entity that's going to exist over a period of time. Okay, cool. Let's work with that. Shooting, cockroach, squirrel, elephant, newborn, toddler, adult woman. How many of those things are in the equal right to life circle now? More than one? 3. The woman, the toddler, and the elephant, but not the newborn. So they got 2 problems. Elephants are one of at least 9 animals that probably are self-aware. Elephants are interesting. Elephants mourn their dead in super interesting ways. They'll have like a gravesite ceremony and then leave. The herd of elephants will leave, sometimes for years. And if they ever come back to that site, they will have an identical ceremony. That indicates understanding existence over time. They can pass the mirror test, which is one test of self-awareness, where you put the animal in front of, so you put an elephant in front of a really big mirror, and they've already put a red dot on the elephant's forehead. An elephant, unlike most animals, will actually use its trunk and rub up against a dot, meaning it can tell that it's looking at its own reflection and not a similar looking elephant. It's one test of self-awareness. So elephants and dolphins and apes and even magpies can do those things. So elephants probably self-aware. Newborns definitely not. Not until somewhere between 3 and 6 months after birth. So you've got 2 big problems. Elephants are now in the equal right to life circle. And again, I don't think you should kill elephants, but I don't think that they're equal. They don't get in the equal right to life circle. And newborns are out. And which one I talk about first is going to depend on what I have for lunch that day, or what I think is going to be more persuasive to them. If they're like an animal rights person, I'm probably going to start with the newborn, right? But this is where I'm going to push against their view. Is they've either included too many things into the circle, like all the animals, or they've excluded too many things, like newborns. And we could walk through all the different things. Ability to feel pain. Okay, almost all animals can feel pain. Almost all of them. So like then everything's in except, I don't know, jellyfish. Okay, so that's a problem. Or viability. You've got to be able to, can you survive outside of a uterus? Okay, almost all animals can survive outside of a uterus. So then they'd all be in. So you can just kind of show, okay, they either are including too many things or they're excluding too many things. And we've never seen an argument change more minds on the spot. Because we're showing them they've got to have to either be pro-equality or pro-life. No, pro-equality or pro-choice, sorry. And I think the view that makes the most sense is to say that these three things go in the equal right to life circle. Why? Because something like humanness is actually the thing that matters. And these three things are out. Doesn't mean that we should mistreat animals. We shouldn't mistreat animals. I think the fact that animals can feel pain matters. That morally matters. That should affect the way that we think about how we treat cows or chickens or things like that. Like actually matters. The fact that dolphins are self-aware and have language and understand their family members should affect the way that we treat them. Doesn't mean they're persons necessarily, but it at least means that we should treat them well, that is our moral obligation. And so I'm going to stop there. I think there's like a follow us slide after that, maybe with like social media on it. Yeah, so there's all the things. You can follow us on all the things. I'll take your questions until Aaron tells me to shut up. Yes?
What do you mean by equal rights to life? I'm confused by that.
I mean that everything, everything that goes in the circle has an equal right to life, meaning like it is equally wrong to kill them. And that it should be illegal to kill them. Like assuming that you're talking to a person who believes in laws at all, like we should have laws that protect innocent people from being harmed, and so there should at least be a law against it. Yeah.
But did you say, and I don't know if you did you say earlier all humans have an equal right to life?
I believe all humans have an equal right to life.
Okay, so even one with a gun walking in this room right now has an equal right to life?
Yeah, so yes, they are a person, but I think you can lose your right to life based on something like a self-defense thing. It doesn't mean that you lose your personhood, but I am not a pacifist. I believe that if gunmen walked in, we should tackle the guy and protect innocent people from being killed. So he's sort of lost like a right to liberty or something like that. Certainly, like if the only way to take someone down who's threatening a bunch of innocent lives is to kill them, I think that it is justified to do that. So take like if a police officer came across a man who is out of his mind waving a gun at 5 people, and the only way that he can protect those 5 people is to shoot to kill. I think that he is morally justified to do that, yes. So I'm not a pacifist. There are some pro-life people who are pacifists who would say that it is never okay to kill any person. And I know some people who would even go further and say it's never okay to kill anything. And I think it's a less nuanced pro-life position than mine. I would say that it is prima facie wrong to kill persons. Prima facie meaning on its face, generally speaking, it is wrong to kill persons. I think there are exceptions like just war and self-defense. Yes?
So I've listened to Mike Adams talk about abortion before I attended the summit.
Mm-hmm.
What he had to say about it. And one of the things that he had to say was that pro-life means pro-life. So like in some of like the really extreme scenarios that, hypotheticals that pro-choice people would sometimes throw out, like, in the case of like a rape or mother's going to die or something like that. Mike said some things, like, well, there might be some situations where an abortion is justifiable, like the mother's going to die and so is the child. And then, yeah, we're going to protect the life of the mother because they're both going to die.
Yes.
Where do you personally stand on that?
That's basically my view. So I think the principle when a mother has a pregnancy that's life-threatening is save as many as we can. Can we save them both? We should treat both mother and child as patients. They're both patients. It's not like we've got this one patient and then this fetus. Like that's not the right way to look at it. We've got these 2 equally valuable people who have this really complicated bodily connection, and this is going in a not healthy way. So can we save them both? So for example, if she has a cancerous uterus, so she's got cancer in her uterus, it's going to eventually spread to the rest of her body. And we're going to need to take her uterus out to prevent the spread of the cancer, which could kill her. Can we wait long enough to deliver the baby as a preemie and do our best to save it? Can we wait till she's at least 18, 20, 23 weeks along, when some of the youngest preemies have survived, and without it spreading to her body? Like maybe if it's only going to spread at week 30, can we wait till as close as like reasonably safely possible? Which I would think would be for the doctors to decide, like, can she make it actually to 28 and it's safe? Or is like to be safe really need to be like 25? Like doctors would work on that as long as they're treating both mother and child as patients. And then do a C-section and just do our best to save the baby and of course then take our uterus out. The hard thing is that there are some cases where we can't save them both. So an ectopic pregnancy is kind of the most common example. It is this really crazy thing that sometimes embryos don't make it all the way through the fallopian tube and into the uterus where they're supposed to go. This is like 7 to 10 day, basically your first water slide ride, okay? And sometimes embryos get stuck in the fallopian tube, or even every once in a while, this is more rare, it's like 5% of the time, it'll end up even somewhere else, like around the ovaries, or even like around the gut. There's actually few that have survived because they planted like on the outside of the uterus or in the guts, and women's bodies are just these amazing things. And they sometimes just adjust, and babies have survived that. But if they get stuck in the fallopian tube, right now we don't have a way of moving the embryo from point A to point B, unfortunately. And so here's a case where we can either do nothing, and about 60% of the time the baby's gonna die on its own. But 40% of the time or so it won't. And so that's a problem, because fallopian tubes are not designed to facilitate a full-term fetus. And so at some point that tube will burst, there'll be major internal bleeding, the baby dies right away, and the mother's life is at major risk. Women die in first world countries all the time from this. This is a really scary thing. This is why when you have your first ultrasound, when you get a positive pregnancy test, they're checking your fallopian tubes and your ovary areas too, just in case. They're checking for ectopic pregnancies to try to prevent from that. We don't have a way to save the baby in that situation. I hope one day we will, but right now we don't. And so there's not really a pro-life debate about whether or not it is justified to intervene in that case. The whole nerdy pro-life debate that like philosophers do sometimes with each other is we're talking about which medical procedures are justified and which ones are not. Because there's at least 3 ways to intervene. But one of them is really non-controversial. Even the Catholic Church agrees is morally justified to have what's called a salpingectomy, which means that they're going to remove either the entire tube or that section of tube in a surgery, and the baby's going to die as a result. They have the foreknowledge that the baby's going to die, but that's not the intent of the surgery. The intent is to save her life, with the foreknowledge that the baby is not going to survive, and it's really tragic and sad, and they're going to do their best. So you could defend that with something called double effect reasoning. If you Wikipedia double effect reasoning, you'll read these 4 questions. It's kind of this rubric for trying to determine if something that's going to have both good and bad outcomes, is it morally justified or not. There's another way you can argue this. If you get our course, which I think probably and eventually you guys are all going to get our course, we have a podcast that goes into detail on some of those other things and the other way to defend it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on from that. But that's my basic answer. I think Mike Adams is right. Yes, in the back.
Yes, I wanted to talk about don't be weird on our end.
Yeah. So don't be weird to me means don't be off-putting. Don't be obnoxious. Be loving. Be normal. And so a lot of our, like if you watch me dialogue tomorrow, you're going to see me intentionally doing things that make me seem like a regular kind of a person and not someone that's like kind of scary. That's basically what that means. And it's just kind of become this thing for us. All like Students for Life quotes this all the time. Don't be weird, guys. And it's just this thing. Anyone else? Yes, over here.
So obviously with a lot going on in New York right now, and there's a lot of conversation about saving the mother's life. Would you be able to speak to whether that's a strong argument or not, or how you would approach having a conversation with someone about that law?
I'm not, flesh it out for me. I'm not
Right,
tracking with the question.
The law is if people are arguing to you, well, the New York law is actually to save the mother because they're doing it for the mother's health.
Oh, okay.
Would you have any kind of argument?
I think the pro-choice people in New York are working with a false assumption that late-term abortions only happen when the mother's life or health is at risk, or maybe when there's a really major health problem with the fetus. That's a common pro-choice talking point. It's just not true. And if you, secular pro-life, if you Google secular pro-life late-term abortions, you'll find multiple articles of them showing evidence that there are elective late-term abortions, meaning late-term abortions that are chosen not for life or health reasons, but because of all kinds of things. It happens sometimes because women have a hard time finding the funding quick enough, and then the later the abortion is, the more it's going to cost, and so it just kind of ends up in the cycle where it just took them a long time to pull together the money. Sometimes state laws affect, they're like trying to figure out how they can get to the next state because it's easier to get it in the next state, or maybe that's the closest abortion clinic. There's multiple reasons, and there are like Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is totally pro-choice research arm of Planned Parenthood, has done research on elective late-term abortions. They did a whole study, and they found like there's these 5 common reasons. None of them are like life or health problems. There are these other 5 common reasons why women have late-term abortions. It's just false. And so, like, my personal views of Virginia governor, who put his whole leg in his mouth when he said that maybe a baby, like if it's born and there's this problem, maybe the doctor and the mother have this conversation about what to do. I think in his mind, he was super unclear, and this is like, unfortunate for him. He's got other problems too, it sounds like. But I think in his mind, what he was not communicating was that he believes that these are all babies that were like going to die in minutes anyway. And therefore there could be this conversation like, what do we do now if it's actually survived the birth? It didn't come out that way. I think that's what he meant. It's still terrible. We should treat disabled people or people who are about to die valuably. We should give them palliative care. We should try to save their lives. Of course, we should do that. But it's not quite as bad as like some pro-lifers are like, he wants to kill all the newborns. No, he doesn't. I don't think that's what's going on for him. He just has bought into a pro-choice myth. Over in the back over here.
Me?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
you're good.
So you talked a lot about the equal rights argument, and you talked about how you found it to be the most effective.
Yes.
Would you say that it's the most effective in mostly individual conversations, or would you say that it's also one of the most effective arguments on a debate level?
That's a great question.
Level, or
Yeah.
us sitting right here?
That's a great question. So I have done 4 public debates, but it's a long time ago. It's not what I do right now. And so we haven't tried this in public debate settings. So to be fair, I don't know. What we have found in our one-on-one conversations and in speeches, which we do both of those a lot, we've found this to be a lot more helpful to pro-choice people, to having them change their minds. So would it work as well in debate? Like, it takes longer than certain other pro-life personhood arguments. But given how rhetorically powerful it is at an equality level, I tend to believe it would be more effective if communicated in a debate. Certainly if I do, I'm sure I'm going to be doing debates down the road. It's just not what I'm focusing on right now. I'm sure I'll be using this instead of other arguments. But I haven't at the same time tested it, so I say that with a pretty open hand. Great question. There was someone over, did you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, I was multitasking, so I might have missed this, but I'm not following how you get from a newborn to getting a person to believe that this is not just a tissue inside the fetus is not just a tissue.
Yeah, so I skipped that on purpose, basically for the sake of time. I was talking about personhood is this huge disagreement between pro-life and pro-choice people. A thing that there's not at this point that much disagreement between pro-life and pro-choice people on is the biological side of this. Is the thing that we're talking about a living human organism? Online, yes, there's a lot of people online that will argue with you about that because Facebook debate is a whole different thing. I've got so much I could say about that. I'm not going to follow that rabbit trail. Man, I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying? There's not a lot of disagreement on living human organism. When we have our college campus conversations, I'm just not arguing with that many people about whether or not it's alive. That was a thing 30 years ago. It's growing. It has to be alive. I almost never get people who are like, I don't really think it's alive yet. Then dead things don't grow. And almost no one argues that it's not a biological member of our species, Homo sapiens. Basically, everyone will concede that. There is some debate on organism. Is it an organism? Meaning, does it have, its parts are working for the good of the whole in this kind of self-directed path toward maturity? There's sometimes so people will throw out so you're saying sperm and egg are alive because they've got human DNA too. It's a sperm and egg and all these different things. Those are all equally viable. Okay, so that's a confusion. No, we're talking about living human organisms. So there's a little bit sometimes discussion on that, but for the most part, we're talking about 2 things. Is it a person? And the other one is, even if it is a person, do her bodily rights trump the right to life of even a person? Because maybe she shouldn't be forced to have her body hooked up. And I don't know, Aaron, are we going to do a thing tomorrow morning? Do we want to do a training on that? Because I can do a training on that tomorrow morning if you want.
Yeah, so I can mention it now. That one thing that we're thinking about doing, let's say 2 things. Number one, you mentioned this study course that's available that Rashia was going to purchase, and that each individual person, if you want a lifetime membership to this, where it's the online course, all the training, all kinds of videos, it'll get you hooked up to their website for life. It'll be $5. And so we're going to get that as a chapter.
A latte.
Yeah, right. And so that's available to you. But number two, if you want to, what we're going to try to do tomorrow is from 9 to 10 do some additional training where you actually will go into the common bodily rights arguments that you hear a lot. That you're probably going to hear tomorrow and Thursday if you give these discussions. So we'll go deeper into that. We just have to find a venue and a place, and if people want that, then we'll figure that out. We'll make that happen after our prayer time. We'll do that from 9 to 10, and then we'll do our
So just for our sake, show of hands, would you be interested in coming tomorrow morning at 9 to hear me do about an hour on how to respond to bodily rights arguments?
All right, then we'll do it. It's just to be a matter of we'll get a room and we'll post that. We'll put that in the group meet tonight, or we'll put it on our Facebook page as well. So we'll be on there tonight or by first thing in the morning.
Cool.
And Lexi will make it happen. So.
I know we're about out of time, so yes.
So the mindset of today's people is not agreeable with the legal system that we have in America.
Oh yeah, most people aren't for abortion through all 9 months. And that's what we have in most states. There's a few states where we've got like bans at like 20 weeks. But for the most part, we've got abortion legal through 9 months. New York just codified that into law. They made it very, very specific until birth. That's not where most pro-choice people are at. That's the good news. The bad news is most of our culture believes that first trimester abortions ought to be legal. So we have our work cut out for us. And I think by focusing on the extremism of the pro-choice position that says that you can have abortions all the way up until birth is going to help us get people having the productive conversation where we can then talk about what about first trimester kids. And that'll be one of the first points that I make tomorrow morning is how to show them that bodily rights arguments are actually inherently extreme arguments. Yes?
So I've heard the argument that basically says that like you're in a burning building and you've got like 500 embryos and you've got the one toddler.
Yep.
And if you grab, like which one you're going to grab, basically, and you can't grab both, how would you respond to that argument?
The funniest thing that happens to me at Outreach is when someone tells me this and they're like, they think they're telling, oh, sorry, for everyone that didn't hear. There's what about the argument that you've got this burning IVF lab? There's this 500 frozen embryos or this toddler. You got to choose between which one. Would you choose the toddler or do you choose the embryos? If you choose the toddler, aren't you basically admitting you don't really think that human life begins at conception, do you? And it's so funny to me when people tell me this and they think they're telling me this for the first time. It's like, what if there's a building on fire? I'm like, an IVF lab? Like, how'd you know? You know? It's like when people are like, you know, what if there was like these two people hooked up, like a world famous violinist? What? You know, like I've heard of this dude. All right, so this is like this became really famous last year. This guy on Twitter made this old argument and everyone was like, this is the most amazing pro-choice argument ever. And I've never had so many of my personal pro-life friends emailing me and the rest of our staff at the same experience like, what do we do with this? Like it's confusing. Because most of us intuitively would admit if it's between 100 embryos or a toddler, you'd grab the toddler. And so we've got a really good article on the blog. If you go to blog.equalrightsinstitute.com, if you go here, there's this helpful page at the top called Archives, where it's just got the titles of all the articles. There's about 150 of them now. No, actually, there's almost 200 now. I just counted. Really good. I'm really proud of and it's mostly not me. It's mostly really good writers on a team like Tim. But Tim wrote a great article on, if you just like word search on that page for IVF lab or burning building, you'll find it. But he's got 4 practical tips on how to respond to this, and then links to a couple of other articles that go more philosophical. Tim was being more nitty-gritty practical, like just how to navigate the conversation. But I'll give a quick summary of a few of the points, and then I know we need to be done, right? Is the last question? Oh, no, okay. I was going to go until he like waves his hand at me. But like a basic summary is like, so here's what's tricky. At like a pragmatic level, like what's going on in the conversation is, I've got to, like this person is feeling really good about the thought experiment they just gave me. It's a really bad argument, but they don't know it's a bad argument. And so I've got to get their permission to fix their bad argument so I can respond to the question they're trying to ask. They're trying to ask an interesting question, but they've messed it up with a flawed thought experiment. And so like what Tim talked about, there's like trying to kind of gain permission. I'm not going to dodge this question. It's an interesting question. We're being pretty charitable there. It's an interesting question, and But I think there's some flaws with the way it's being presented here. Can I try to show you why and fix it for you so that then I can answer the question I think you're trying to get me to ask? I think you're trying to get me to ask, do I care more about saving, one toddler versus like 100 embryos? The problem is the way the thought experiment is set up is not equal. Like all things are not equal in this thought experiment. For example, toddlers can feel pain. That's going to affect my intuitions in the moment if I've got to make this gut decision. Do I allow this toddler's skin to melt while it's screaming in pain? Sorry to be kind of grisly, but like that's the thought experiment. Versus 100 embryos that aren't conscious, sentient, able to feel pain at all. Like that's at least going to be part of the moral math that I'm doing. Another question, how do I know that the frozen embryos are going to survive? How do I know that they're going to end up like implanted in someone? Right now, there are hundreds of thousands of frozen embryos on ice that are basically without parents. And there's this huge question like, what do we do with the frozen embryos? And some people want to kill them for research, which I'm opposed to. But like this is a logistical problem. There's a lot of embryos and there's not enough people willing to adopt them. There's this thing called snowflake adoption where instead of adopting like a newborn, you're adopting a frozen embryo and they do their best to implant the embryo into your uterus and you adopt one of these leftover frozen embryos or maybe multiple of them. That's super cool. There's not enough people willing to do it for us to save all that we have right now. Hopefully that changes. So like these are all these like, see how like it's a little bit more complicated than just like what they're presenting. So what I might say is like, hey, can we fix that? Can we like say some things like assuming that all the embryos would be saved, assuming, it's like some different things like basically in the end, if you make all things being equal, I'm going to save more. So if I know that all 100 embryos are going to survive, I'll probably save the 100 embryos. Like at some point there's a number where it's high enough that it trumps the fact that like the toddler feels pain and fear and things like that. There's a response to this I don't like so much. It's kind of, and there's one of my favorite pro-life speakers says this, and it's really funny. But he'll like in a room like this, he'll be like, look, maybe just admit that we're inconsistent sometimes. It doesn't prove that the unborn is not human. This is true. So like if this room were on fire and I could either save all of you or save my wife, you're toast. That's funny. I'm not sure if it's the right answer because like, the question ought to not be, what would we do? That's the wrong question. Like, that's a psychological question. I don't know. I have no idea what I would do in the situation. The right question is, what ought we do? What do we actually think that we would want to do in the situation, given the time that we have right now to think about the situation? And I think if it's between saving all of you or my wife, I think I'd save all of you. Like, at some point, and even if you're like, this is not enough people to trump your wife, Josh, there's only like 70 people here. Okay, what if it was 1 million? Like, at some point, we had a number where I think clearly I should save all of you and not my wife. And so what I want to do is like find out, say like if all things are equal, I'm probably going to save whatever is the greater number of embryos. But the way that the question is usually worded, there's all these problems that lead people to want to save the toddler. And it doesn't actually prove that we don't think that the embryos are human. It's just there's all these complicated logistical kind of questions. So anyway, it's not a good argument, but you're going to probably hear it tomorrow. Yes?
What do you do for people who think that people in comas or the elderly who are can't take care of themselves or can't think anymore should be slowly killed in a humane way as part of the human race, but they no longer have the right to live because they're a strain on society?
Yeah.
As compared, at an equal way of the unborn, and that it's okay to kill the unborn as well.
Yeah.
That they're kind of equal.
I'd probably first say I'm not sure how to slowly kill someone in a humane way. But also, I think that it's really bad if we get to a place where we think of older people as being this like drain on society. Like this is a thing, like in Oregon right now, like where assisted suicide has been legal for a long time. You've got this situation that is very predictable. Like pro-lifers were saying this would be a problem before they passed a law. We're saying older people are going to end up feeling coerced to do the assisted suicide thing because that's a $60 shot versus $6,000, $60,000, $600,000 of medical care. It's like, I could give such a greater inheritance to my kids kind of a thing if I just go now. It'd be easier for everyone emotionally. And then they feel compelled to kill themselves when they wouldn't otherwise. That's terrible. I've been in the Netherlands debating euthanasia with it's one of the first countries that legalized it, and they're proud of it. They're like, we're so much more forward thinking than like all these other countries, like you dumb Americans, because we have euthanasia. But like one of the things that they told me, this was a long time ago, but they were like, look, like it's really clear in the law. Multiple doctors have to sign off. Like obviously the patient has to sign off. The patient's family's got to sign off. Multiple doctors, a couple of nurses. Like there's all these safeguards. And then I come back to the States and do research, and I find doctors from the Netherlands saying, yeah, that's the way the law was written, but that's not actually what happens. It's not enforceable. So you have the situation where people are being euthanized against their will a large percentage of the time. There's one doctor in the Netherlands that tells, it's a true story. He said he was taking care of a person, not terminal person that just needed medical care in the hospital for, weeks or whatever. So he's taking care of this person. He takes the weekend off. I think he even actually took a quick weekend vacation, like they went out of town with his family. And he comes back on Monday and there's someone else in the bed. And he goes to the nurse's station and says, where's my patient? And he said, oh, we euthanized him over the weekend. And he said, why? He wasn't terminal. He said, we needed the bed. Direct quote. So he said, this is where things go. Like it's really hard to prevent that kind of thing from happening. Like if you know about a lot of things that go on in a hospice care, like we already have an end-of-life problem. It's just really hard to solve that problem. And what I want to say is, you are an equally valuable human being regardless of what you can do functionally. And we should treat you as such, whether you're young or old, regardless of what your race is, regardless of what your gender is, regardless of your, whether you're LGBT or not, like all these different things. Like we should just treat you like a valuable person, regardless of what you can do functionally. Anybody else? Yes, over here again. Yeah.
Do you have any book recommendations?
Book recommendations for learning more about the abortion issue?
Yes.
One of my favorite, okay, so I got a few. So at a really practical level, easiest read, Common Ground Without Compromise by Steve Wagner. If you go to commongroundbook.com, you take a little survey, you can actually get the book for free. But you can also buy it on Amazon if you don't want to do that. It's 25 questions that you can often use to find common ground with pro-choice people. It's awesome, super quick. You can read it in a couple hours. Some of my favorite philosophy books on the subject, though. So Christopher Kazor, which is spelled K-A-C-Z-O-R, but pronounced Kazor. He wrote a really good book called The Ethics of Abortion. It's awesome. Charles Camosy has written a controversial book within the pro-life community, but I think all pro-life people should read it, called Beyond the Abortion Wars. Camosy's on my advisory board, so just so you know that. Camosy is more liberal than I am politically. I don't agree with everything in the book, and if you're conservative, you probably won't either. But we should take Camosy's ideas seriously. And he makes an argument really similar to the equal rights argument, which I love, so I'm happy about that. But he's very interesting. Dr. Francis Beckwith wrote a book a long time ago called Politically Correct Death, but he wrote a new one more recently called Defending Life. It's pretty good. I like Kazor a little bit better on philosophy, but Beckwith has some really good stuff on jurisprudence and history of Roe versus Wade. Clark Forsyth has a couple of awesome books, one of which I haven't read yet, but I've heard from everyone that's amazing, and it's on a deeper history of Roe v. Wade. I've heard from enough people that I trust that it's awesome that I'm willing to recommend it, even though I haven't read it yet. But it really gets into the history of what was going on. Like he basically studied Supreme Court justices' personal notes and stuff and kind of worked out for the 2 years before Roe what was actually going on and how politically motivated Roe was. But Clark's first book, Politics for the Greatest Good, if you're kind of nerdy about politics and legal strategy, that's awesome. And he talks about how prudence is a virtue, and pro-life people should stop ignoring the idea of prudence, that we should have good strategy, and how we try to end abortion as quickly as possible. It's either politics for the greater or greatest good. I forget which one, but that one is awesome too. I'll stop there. Yes?
What book did you say again on the Roe versus Wade?
I don't remember the name of it, but Roe v. Wade is in the title. If you look up Clark Forsyth, which is spelled F-O-R-S-Y-T-H-E, Forsyth, then you'll find his Roe v. Wade book. That's more recent. The Politics for the Greater Good book was further back. Okay, let's stop there. Thanks so much.
So let's give Josh a big round of applause. actually reserved the tables down here in, like the breakfast tables over right outside the LGBTQI office for tomorrow morning at 10. So we'll just be there.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the best place. So we'll be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll walk through bodily autonomy arguments, and then we will be outside of Lutz.
We'll be outside of Lutz.
Starting at 10.
10 to 2, and you're going to be there at 10?
Yes.
All right, and then we have volunteers for the rest of the time.
That's whatever I want to call it.
Chat.
Robert, calm down.
Come chat with us and with students.
To Lutz.
Go to Lutz. Lutz.
All right, let me pray for us real quick before we leave. Lord, thank you for Josh. Thank you for the work that they're doing. We just pray for the Eagle Rights Institute. Pray, Lord, that you would just bless this ministry, that you would bless them and their work, that you would bring people, even tonight, that you would bring maybe some of these students who hear some of these arguments the first time and think, this is what I want to do with my life. That what better to give your life to than defending those that can't defend themselves, and that there be even people in this room right now whose hearts and minds may have been changed on this issue or solidified on this issue, that would think that this is what they want to give their life to, and so that they would have conversations with Josh about how they can do that, that the training that they are able to provide through their online academy, that we be able to get that to the students here on the campus, and that this campus can be transformed on this life issue, that you would be with all of us tomorrow as we engage with people on this really hard issue, that we would be very loving, that we would speak the truth in love, but that we would actually speak the truth, Lord, that you would certainly be with him as he's in the hot seat engaging with people, and that there could be lots of students that would come and to learn how we can do a better job of engaging on this issue tomorrow in this week, Lord. We certainly pray for the debate, Lord, that it would be for your glory, and that lots of people would have their hearts and minds changed on this issue. So we just thank you for the opportunity to even engage in this and to think better about this really important issue. So we thank you for Josh and the work that they're doing, and just praying for them in their continued success. We love you. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I'll hang out if people have more questions.
That's great.
Thanks.
So we'll talk more, but we just got